the groove. You know what? The dovetail is the most overrated joint in woodworking, and the Morse and 10 is the most underrated. Then I've got to believe that the groove has to be the most underappreciated. Think about it. It's got to be one of the most flexible joints in woodworking. I use them all the time in almost every project I use. Drawers, caseworks, boxes, just about anywhere I need something to go along the grain, I'm going to be using some form of a groove. They can be incredibly strong because it increases your gluing surface. It can also be incredibly loose and still keep the joint together. How many other joints you know that can handle cross-grain movement? You can hide them. You can show them off. You can actually use them in items like inlay. Just fill in a darker wood or lighter wood in the groove, and you've got a custom inlay. They're incredibly forgiving and very easy to make with a multitude of tools. So today, let's talk about grooves. And at the end, I'll show you a new product that we're coming out with to help support the school.
There is no end-all be-all best way of making grooves. A lot of people prefer using power tools, especially a table saw where all you have to do is set up the height and adjust the fence. You can even put a dado stack or make multiple passes with a standard blade. Some people prefer using routers. This example has a router with a fence already mounted to it. It's the closest it is to hand planes because it's very hard to get this one off as long as you're going in the proper direction. If you don't have that option, you can always just put a fence down with a straight board. The disadvantage is if the board moves or if your measurements aren't dead on perfect, you can get slightly off. When I'm using a router, I prefer using a router table, even this little redneck jig. Taking the time to set up a power tool like this is really worth it when you know you're going to be doing grooves for hours on end, such as in a cabinet shop or when you're doing all the drawers for an entire kitchen.
You don't even need a power tool to cut them. You can basically just mark out your baseline. I kind of typically would do my the show side line, so I'll go a 1/2 inch for a 1/4 inch groove that has a 1/4 inch base. Just mark it down with a really heavy knife line. Go heavy. And that marks your front. Then take your chisel and just carve it out. Basically, just drop your chisel down. I like to start out bevel up and make a bunch of relief cuts coming back. And then come back and scoop it out and bevel down. And then you just carve it straight out. Obviously it takes longer, but all you've got is an $8 chisel. And it really doesn't take that long to go a certain distance. Once you got your shoulders established, you can basically just ride that bevel on the base. Keep scooping it out a little deeper each time. Use your chisel as a plane. Go as deep as you need to. But the cool way that people think about doing grooves nowadays seems to be with hand planes. Especially since Roy Underhill did that last Woodwright show. He talked about all these combination planes and stuff like that. This is one my dad bought me back when I first got into woodworking. And he got a really nice one. It's a number 50. But what you can find these things fairly inexpensively. What's hard to find is a complete set of blades. And what we got here is the complete set. I've got the 1/4 inch one that I use most of the time already in here. And looking at these, you can tell that I've used the tongue and grooving plane because a 1/4 incher fits in that little tongue and slot. And I've used a few of these other ones, but most of these are just how the set came to me almost 6 years ago. I've never really used these grooving, these beading planes or any of these other sizes that you can use for rabbets and stuff. And that's kind of what this plane is designed for. It can do all those kinds of stuff. You have a blade that fits in right here that you can, by loosening the one screw or the other, it releases it, and you can move the blade up and down with this little lever right there. Supposedly, they call these a number 50 because they had 50 different versions of these blades that would fit into this to do all kinds of things. But I ended up using it just for grooving. And what I found, I used to disassemble it, take the blade out, put it back in a nice kit all the time. And then after a while, I just left this 1/4 inch in. And after a long while, I figured out that I could pretty much leave this at the setting. This is a 1/4 inch brass rod that I use to size the fence over. You can pretty much leave it at that setting forever. And that's what I was doing. I would just leave this in the shelf. After about a year or two of ownership, I figured out I didn't really use anything other than the 1/4 inch bit, and I never really changed the setting very much. Just a 1/4 inch over. Sometimes I would go 3/8 of an inch up from the edge. And it's kind of a setting. And this is, I'm going to show you how this is used, but that's one of those things that after a while, it just took a long time to set up. Now, they have other ones of these that are out there. The number 55s, the number 45s from Stanley. Record from England has one that I've been told is one of the best plow planes, grooving planes ever made. It's an 043. And what's funny is when you look on eBay to find them, they came with 3 or 4 different blades, but the only ones you ever find are the 1/4 inchers because people would just leave them in there and they lose the other blades. So let me show you how this works. So what I have here is a 1/4 inch blade. I've secured it down. It goes just below the skate right here. The skate is the bottom of the groove. I have a fence on this side that I can move backwards and forwards. And then I have a depth gauge. This little screw right here raises and lowers this little platform that it rests on. Fairly simple. The idea behind plow planes, I'm going to use the other side of that board I was chiseling on, is you hang them off the edge ever so slightly. So I've got it off this edge a little bit so that the skate, the fence can ride against them. And then you just start plowing away. I start at this far edge, and basically you can focus on keeping it down. All my front hand's pressure is pressing against the fence down here, going this way, and this hand's pressure is just providing forward propulsion. So you kind of work your way back until you're making full cuts. Now what you're finding right here is, yes, they get kind of clogged. You occasionally have to clean them out. But they do make fairly quick work if you get them set up. The other fun thing I find is I am on the 1/4 incher and the smaller ones, it can't get that much pressure right here. So I'm constantly having to re-lower it down. Now this just might be a quirk of mine, but other blogs I've saved that say these things are kind of finicky, and I kind of believe them. Once it stops making shavings, you've got your groove. So that there is a combination plane. Again, there are different variations out there. You can buy them fairly easily nowadays. They even have new versions from Lie-Nielsen, Lee Valley, all those kind of stuff. But to me, this is not that big an advantage over the power tool because they do require setup. You're constantly fiddling with them, and it's not that big a time saving. Here's how I do grooves nowadays. You have a board, maybe you're making a small box, working on it. I come over, I secure it somehow. I'm just going to use my hold fast for today. A good whack. And I literally walk over to my tool chest. If you've been following my blog, you'll remember I had posted a video on how to heat treat blades. This is the plane I made with those heat treating blades. And I posted a little video on a poor man's slinky. This is the same plane from those videos. Same techniques. I hold it over to the left side, I start it. And just like that, I've got me a nice, plain, straight groove. And I put my plane back. I don't change the settings, I don't sharpen it, I don't do anything. I sharpen that plane maybe once a year. And that thing's been used by students, me, all the time. It's just a great little device, but that's how quick it is. So once again, you pick up a plane, it's got a little groove on bottom, just like the skate. You have a small gap right there. It comes down at a certain degrees. This is my depth stop, this other piece of wood. There's the blade there. Very simple to make if you want to make one. Otherwise, we will be selling an updated version on our website as a fundraiser. I secure it, and here we go. Starting on the far end, I take a few pass cuts, and then it's just a matter of keeping the skate, and you get nice shavings. Whenever it stops cutting, I know I'm about 1/4 of an inch deep, and I have a nice, smooth groove. I will say, having one tool dedicated to making one joint, one style, one way, 1/4 inch over, 1/4 inch down, 1/4 inch deep, it is a pure luxury. But I worked long enough before I made this tool that I knew that that's what I used all the time. So it makes sense once you've gotten into woodworking and you're doing something repetitive over and over and over to find a way to do it faster, better, and easier. And that's what this does for me. Let me show you one way I use it. I'm going to make a quick drawer for my tool rack over here. So, here we go. I got the structure for a simple box, my little drawer. I laid out so it's grain matched as possible because well, might as well, if you're going to be doing anything, do it well. And I went ahead and I put a pencil mark where I want the groove to be on the bottom. Now, if I wasn't doing a box that required different thicknesses for the sides, back, and front, I would have just laid all these out, put a groove on one board, and then cut them after the fact. But these are all different sizes, so it's a little more complicated. So here's how I go about it. So I just take one board at a time, position it, put a groove in it. Because I'm using the same tool, all these boards are going to match up because it's referencing the base, which is my reference surface for this particular box. And I'm probably going a little bit against the grain on this particular board, but I'm on the inside, so nobody cares. There's one done. Go for the next one. Make sure my pencil line is lined up. Secure it. I'm hanging it ever so slightly off the side of the bench so that the fence can ride against that. These smaller ones are actually a little bit harder, but they don't take long. Whenever it stops cutting, I'm done. There's the second side. Find my pencil line. Secure it. Now I want you to think about how long it would have taken to pull out your router, install the proper bit. I mean, unless you're Norm Abram, you're not going to have 100 different routers set up with one bit in each one. So you're going to have to change out bits, you're going to have to set up your fences, all that kind of stuff. And yes, the actual cutting with this tool takes longer than just barreling over a table saw or going through a router, but there's no setup. You just get to work. Okay, now my last board. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. This board right here is a little bit thinner. Okay? So for the type of drawer I want to slide, the bottom to slide underneath this one so it can expand and contract. So I'm just going to use this to mark out the base that I need it plane down to. That way I know that the boards will slide right underneath this little ledge. So all I do is I grab my plane, get down to that piece. Stop when I get to my baseline. And there we go. So I now have all the box boards for my sides of my box. Set up and go. So, through the magic of editing, voila, we have a drawer. Now, I've already done a video on how to do dovetails, and that's how I did this particular drawer frame. And you don't have to dovetail. You can do rabbets, you can do butt joints, you can do pocket holes. It doesn't really matter. I just did it because it's cheap and fairly quick. Now, notice, on the bottom of the drawer, we have a groove. And because we used a consistent fence with a dedicated tool that is even all the way around. And this back side that I put a groove in, I use that as a reference to shave off. So now I can slide a drawer in the back and it will accommodate movement here. So because I've already constructed the frame and I've got a groove, let's make that drawer bottom using a dedicated plow plane, or you can do the same trick with a router table, a table saw, plane router, or even a multi-function plow plane. It doesn't really matter. I just like the fact that I can, with one tool, I can do everything. So I've got my drawer bottom here. I don't care what thickness it is, but real quickly I'm going to flatten the top. I'm going to leave the bottom rough. It's just how it came from Home Depot. And then I'm going to size it perfectly to fit width-wise and then to slide into those grooves. And I'll show you how I do that now. Okay, so here's that drawer bottom. I've already made one of these sides so it will fit perfectly in a groove, okay? Using just that dedicated plane. Once again, I like it because you set it, forget it, just use it. Remember, this is a perfect 1/4 inch over. Now, the problems I've found with having a perfect thing like that is when you have a thin board like this, it is going to flex a little bit, so as you're planing it, it's not going to be dead on perfect. A lot of times I will use this plane to create a 1/4 inch inlay and a 1/4 inch groove, but I use a thicker board. So I'm going to show you how to make a perfect sliding groove into this board. And once again, I have a rough back and a smooth front. So I'm going to put the front towards me, Now I don't really care if there is tear out on the bottom of this groove, because nobody's going to see it. And once again, you start at the end and you want to go slow so that you don't bite too much. And I'm not putting much pressure at all, focusing on keeping it straight up and down. And then I just make thin shavings until it stops. And yes, this does take longer than a table saw or router, but the fact that I didn't have to walk across my shop or set up those machines means the overall time is a lot less. And this is just a hobby for most of us, so you don't need to take much time. So stop cutting. Now, this is probably going to be a very tight 1/4 inch, because remember, I use this for inlays. So here's another thing. I want this to move in the groove, so I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. I got a fence right here. Now that I've created that fence there, I can just drop that in, and all I got to do is focus on keeping it flat and on that groove. And there we go. A little bit shorter, and now it should slide really easy on a groove. So, now to do the end grain. And you can do it with a plane, but typically what I will do is I'm just going to connect these two lines with a saw, going down that depth, and then remove it with a chisel. I just find that cheaper. I'll show you how I do that. So I've got my 2 indentations right there to my perfect depth. I'm just going to set the depth inside a little bit and probably make it a little bit more. Just draw me a quick line to follow with my saw. No big deal. Remember, this is the bottom, so I don't really care too much what it looks like. Grab a bench hook. Grab my crosscut saw, because I am going across a grain. Establish my kerf line. Then just try and make smooth strokes until I hit that baseline, which is the bottom of those 2 shells. And if I cut into them a tad bit, I'm not that concerned. Do the same thing to the other side. Establish a kerf line. Nice smooth strokes. There we go. So you can see I have 2 saw cut lines on either side. Now to remove that waste with a chisel. So grab a chisel, and this is one of the few times I actually do like having a little bit wider chisel. And I will just chip it out. Easy peasy. Do the other side. And I don't suggest you hit it with your palm like I'm doing now. That's a bad way to get carpal tunnel syndrome, which I have. And then take a really sharp chisel. I go to my tried and true 1/2 incher and just smooth it out. Now this part is not necessary, but if you do want to clean up the bottom a little bit, or if the bottom is more than a 1/2 inch so that it would be touching on the bottom of the groove, this would be the time just to smooth it out. I typically wait until the last if I am going to smooth out the bottom. So it's just out of force of habit, I guess. Also, if you sign your work, it's kind of easier to sign it before you put it in as a shelf. So here you go. You got your drawer. Now, you don't really need to have a groove in the back. I just use that groove to set the depth for the side. So I slide in my front, drop it in, push it in. It's a bit of a tight fit, but that's kind of what we want. And there we go. In a second, all I'm going to do is put some tiny nails right there and smooth out the back. And we have a nice drawer bottom and a nice drawer. Earlier I said that You know, you can use grooves for everything, but having a quarter inch over, quarter inch deep was my preferred setting. And I used it a lot more than just making boxes and stuff. It's basically only your imagination that is slowing you down. So here's the deal. I need to make a quick drawer pull for this little drawer I just built. So let's use the plane. Okay, I've got another piece of that same construction lumber, nice straight grained on this one. It's quarter sawn. So I want to create a quick door pull. So I'm just figuring out which section. Okay, I like that little section right there. So here we go. Into the clamp, just as normal. Make a groove. Nothing special here. It's just how you use those grooves that makes all the difference in the world. Again, I haven't sharpened this, I haven't changed its settings, I just set it and forget it. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to round over this interior a little bit. Got some 150 grit sandpaper just to make it comfortable. And that's going to be my little groove, my finger slot. Okay. So, let me look, how big of a groove, how big of a handle do I want? I don't know. Let's say this overall thing is 9 inches, so maybe 1.5 inches. That would be 1/6 the width. Round numbers are nice. And how deep? Maybe 3/4 inch would give me enough space to put a screw in. So there we go. I'm just going to mark 3/4 inch over. 1.5 inches, which is twice that size, which is 1/6. The overall. Slide it in my clamp. Mark 90 degrees. This is a little dovetail mark that I use a lot. Mark at 90 degrees. I don't really use it too much for the angles. After you get a little practice, you don't need it, but grab a rip saw. I'll use a dovetail because I'm too lazy to walk across the shop. You know what? I'm going to solve for the thickness also. Okay, and now saw it off. There we go. So there you go. I have a little tiny door pull. Should look nice on the drawer. And I'll shape it up with a chisel and rasp and slope it. Other things you can do with this size is, here's that groove for that little door pull I made. If I were to turn it on its side, keeping it flat on the top, this hand is pressing this way, this hand is pressing down. Okay, now I'm going to take this piece off. I'm going to use it again in a second. It is a 1/4 inch dowel now, 1/4 inch deep, 1/4 inch over. Okay, I'm going to use that in a second. You're going to see that in a second. But what do you notice there? Could that be a picture frame? The glass, the back of your picture, your cardboard setting? Put miters on it. There you go. You got a quick picture frame. Nice and easy. Now, I've been talking about doing inlays and stuff. Here's that piece I just took off. Clear this off, and let me show you how that works. Obviously, this is pine, so it's not going to be pretty, but I'll show you how it works. I got a piece of scrap poplar. You cut the groove, and because, well, this should be fairly obvious. You got a 1/4 inch groove, 1/4 inch over, 1/4 inch deep. So you can take a piece of walnut, cherry, into hot or holly or something like that, and just slide it in and tap it down. It's going to be a tight fit. That's what you want. Where's my hammer? Just a light tap down. Grab your plane, smooth it out, and smooth it flush, and there you go. You got a nice little inlay. Shows you how it's done. I know poplar and pine is not the best, but you get the idea. Grooves. As I said earlier, I believe they are the most underappreciated joint in woodworking. If you're going to be building furniture, you're going to be making a lot of grooves and dados. It's just the nature of the business. You can't get around them. So you've got to figure out some way to do it. You can use your table saw. You can put a dado jig in your table saw. Just moving the fence, you have to be very accurate with the fence. A little fiddling involved. You can set up a router table. You could be like Norm Agrum, set up a dedicated router with one bit that you never change out, that's set up a certain depth, and just use that for all of them, kind of like I do here. With hand planes. You can set up a redneck router table like I did, you saw the example. Just leave your little $60 router in there and just not worry about it. Or you can go the hand plane route, which I enjoy the most because it's quick, it's easy, it's clean. It doesn't make a lot of noise, and I can do it just reaching behind me and grabbing my planes. I don't have to do much fiddling. The multiple combination grooving planes, there is some fiddling in there, but they are easier to do dados and stuff. But I've found that I basically, when I was using mine, I eventually just left set up, and that was it. Which is the motivation for me to build my original set. This is a third version of mine. And the idea behind these original ones was I had 4 perfectly 1/4 inch boards that I laminated together at different thicknesses and cut out the middle. It's a common design you see printed in magazines. They were all the rage maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I've gone through several versions of these. I've improved the design. I've designed cutouts so that they side escapement, all that kind of stuff. But to help support the school, I'm coming out with a whole new design that I haven't seen anybody else doing to sell, to market. So if you don't want to spend a weekend of your time making a dedicated set of your own, you can buy a set and help support the school. Basically, the big improvements is the stop on the side. What I found that over time, you might want to flatten the bottom skate. And if you do that when you raise it, so somehow you have to raise the stop. Well, if you do the original design that was widely published, you can't, because the stop is also continued on the middle, and it's very hard to flatten or lower that middle section. So on my new design, the center stop is actually higher, giving us time to adjust it, to flatten it, to sand it, to reshape it over time. So this should last your lifetime, if not your kids. Also, I've improved the side escapement, and instead of being a laminate version, I'm making the body out of solid lumber. Only the side stop is glued on. So that should greatly improve it. Plus that allows me to choose better woods, harder woods. I'm making these out of curly and hard maple. I might even do some cherries. This is a cherry version, and I've made some other versions out of cherry that worked out very well, but I think I'll probably be doing hard maple. You can see them for sale online at my school. I am going to have an introductory special for like the first 2-3 weeks. This is May in 2014, simply because this is going to be the only time I ever take deposits on what I will make in the future, because I have to basically buy the material to make the planes. Also, I've caught a new version, entirely different from anything I've seen before, a double version. Most people will either make a left and right hand version, as I did here. I only end up using my right hand version, even going against the grain. You saw me do it in the video. It's not that big a deal, but some people want to go left and right. You can either buy 2 planes, which might be a little pricey, or you can buy a double plane. It has a left and right version all set up. You just go left way, right way. It works really well, and the added mass in the size of it, I hate to say it's a little bit more comfortable. And once again, it's going to be made out of a solid block of wood, with the exception of the stops, which I can use decorative woods on, like curly maples, cherries, all that kind of stuff. Most of these will be made out of hard curly maple. I am also going to be introducing a deluxe version. This is for those of y'all that like a little plane. I guess you could call it a infill grooving plane. I'm only going to be doing it on the double, but we're going to be having the sides made out of solid brass. Screwed on, peened flat, smooth, so you can't even see it. So it's going to be a really nice one, and I would tell you, having used this for a little while, the added mass, it makes the job a lot easier. This is not a plane that you're using for an hour at a time. You're basically using it for 30 seconds at a time. So a little extra mass isn't that much for your muscles, but it sure does make the job easier, because once you get it moving, it flows through everything. I am really impressed at how this infill one works, and it's going to be our deluxe version. Please go to our website. It's at wortheffort.com/store, or you can just click the store option, and I'll have these available online to help support the school. I hope you enjoyed this video. You learned a little bit. You saw that you could use a simple dedicated plane like this to make drawer boxes, which is my most common use. I also make picture frames with them. I do little inlays on tables. I do a lot of little racing stripe inlays on drawer fronts. Some people like it at the craft shows. Basically, your imagination is the limit. So, as always I say, it's always worth the effort to learn a new way, create stuff, and share it with others. Y'all be safe and have fun.